Nigeria stands at a delicate crossroad where insecurity and diplomacy intertwine. Now, from the controversy surrounding President Tinubu's ambassadorial nominees to the daunting responsibilities awaiting the new Minister of Defense, the nation struggles against insurgency, banditry, and internal unrest. It's just a domestic affair. Now, apart from that, it also reverberates across its foreign relations. Now, as questions mount over credibility, competence, and strategic direction, and also a debate intensifies, the country continues to rely solely on its own institutions, but there are calls that more still needs to be done. Let's, of course, get into the crux of the conversation. My guest tonight, of course, I have Brigadier General Sani Usman, retired as the former Director of Media and Public Relations of the Nigerian Army and also a security expert. I have James Barnett, is a PhD candidate, University of Oxford. Dr. Tony Ofoyetan is the Director General, International Institute of Professional Security, and also Dr. Diyeli Aigbe is a lecturer at the Department of Criminology and also Security Studies, Caleb University. All my guests are joining virtually. It's great to have you, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
All right, let me start.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Let me start with you. Of course, Brigadier General Sani Usman. Let's open the conversation with the new Minister of Defense, that particular ministry being retooled. Mr. President, of course, we saw the resignation of the former minister, and right now we have General Christopher Musa, who was the CDS, but right now is now the Minister of Defense. There are high hopes, but I'd like to know from, I mean, you are also an officer yourself. You served, within the Nigerian Army. Looking at the track record, the years of experience, the expectation ahead, would you say to a very large extent this peak is a square peg in a square hole?
Absolutely so. There is no doubt about his capacity. And the issue of capacity was one of the things that were lacking in security architecture, especially at strategic level. Therefore, I would dare say absolutely. And beyond mere knowledge, I had the privilege of working along with him for several years. So I have confidence, and more so, he is the person that has the feel, or rather the pulse of what is happening on the security architecture, being in the military for over 3 decades. So I believe he will bring his wealth of knowledge and experience at various command staff and instructional, as well the latest command responsibility he had, being the Chief of Defense Staff of Nigeria, to consolidate and bring that to bear on his appointment as the Honorable Minister of Defense of this country.
All right. What's also your take, Dr. Aigbe?
Yes, he has the capacity, like the general said, he has the capacity. And like he had a press briefing, said he's being loved. I've seen the love of Nigerians. And the man is really a blessed man, blessed from a metamorphose from the as a former chief of staff to now to the Minister of Defense within the space of how many months, So he's a really blessed man and is really favored. I hope you're able to meet I believe he has that capacity based on his track record and his passion. You could recall that immediately he left the position as a Joint Chief of Staff. This kidnapping was so frequent, So that was just like a loophole. The bandits took advantage of that vulnerability to strike, Sometimes and maybe the president now saw that he was a mistake. He quickly reacted by reshuffling the service chief, instead of him to probably understudy the process. So he's not trying to mitigate that issue, which he had to solve that problem now. So I think he has done well by doing that, by trying to. And you could see the applause of Nigerians now celebrating the president. So if you put the interest of Nigeria now, the president put the interest of Nigeria. And this is a profiling of the former chief of Minister of Defense and even the president, Bello Matawani, he was a school teacher. I did a profile. Why should this person be Minister of Defense in the first place? The general will agree with me. So what we did with General Musa coming in now, it's a first-time combat experience. I've done that combat, and this synergy with the other service teams. This is one of us now. So you're able to know that they want to flow together and able to put maybe to the work. So he has the capacity. I'm supporting him, and I want to praise the president, President Bola Tinubu, for this insight, for taking the bold move by the whole and to do this. And you can see people are praising him, applauding him for the decision he has taken. So I believe he able to sustain subsequent appointment.
All right.
So we can solve this problem once and for all.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ofoyetan. If you can hear me, also, I would like you to speak on this, particularly on the area of expectations.
Thank you very much for having me. The area of expectation, I think I will put a lot of load on the Honorable Minister, expecting him to work assiduously and closely with all the service chiefs and head of security agencies. One of the things I expect that he would encourage all security agencies to do expeditiously is to remove all moles and terrorist sympathizers in all security formations in Nigeria. Those that give information to terrorists at different levels, either in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the DSS, the police, the NSCDC, just name it. They should be able to think about conducting holistic personnel audit in all the security formations in the country. And apart from that, I expect that we will be very intentional about the recovery of ungoverned spaces, especially in the northern part of the country. There are too many ungoverned spaces that is also impeding on their successes. That is one area I expect that he should be very intentional about. I also expect that the Honorable Minister will be able to look at the possibility of identifying, arresting, and prosecuting terrorist sympathizers in this country. And of course, their sponsors. Trace the money, identify them, not just arrest them, prosecute them, shame them. Now, this is the main foundation upon which terrorism is being sustained. If he is able to work with other security agencies with the political will and confidence of Mr. President, and they are able to deal decisively with what you call the terrorist sponsors in the country, I think that will go a long way. And I think one thing I expect the minister to also discuss with Mr. President, if he must succeed as the Minister of Defense, is to see how federal government will take over all mining sites in Nigeria today. It may be a temporary decision, but I think it is a decision that must be speedily, there must be speedy intervention in the taking over of all mining sites, irrespective of the type of mining as it is now. Because that, of course, is a major catalyst that is also encouraging, sustaining, and helping terrorism in this country as we speak. And I think it should also look at the possibility of encouraging a higher budgetary expenses so that they will be able to go into technological sophistication.
Sorry to interrupt you, Doctor. I mean, I'm going to come in. I'm going to come in. You said quite a couple of things, but I'm going to come in the area where you said higher budgetary expenses. Over the years, our budget on security has always got the lion's share. So the question is it about the money spent or the value Nigerians are getting at the end of the day with these monies?
It's both. But I can tell you of one thing. The whole budgetary expenses as far as the whole security architecture of this country combined together is not up to a state budget in any of the civilized countries you can think of. Not up to a state budget. So when you are talking about purchase of technological equipment, look at an average drone. How much is an assault drone? How many do we have in the country? I'm not sure Nigeria has up to 100 assault drones. So these are things we are talking about. You know, when you are talking about improvement in technology, what you are simply saying is, is either you are buying the technology, you are stealing the technology, or you are inventing the technology.
All right, Doctor.
And that involves high volume of money.
All right, Dr. Ofoyetan, thank you so much. Just quickly before we go on a break, I would also like the opinion of James Barnett on this. James, PhD candidate, University of Oxford. It's great to have you. Now, looking at Nigeria, its strategic positioning, and of course the barrage of what I call it internal attacks. I mean, from a security perspective, what would you say has been the missing gap in our fight here?
Thank you very much, Dapo, and then thanks to my fellow panelists. I would echo what they said about the kind of high hopes for the new Minister of Defense. I think it's been, somewhat heartening at a time when the country is otherwise quite polarized to see, a degree of kind of broad-based support for this new appointment. And that certainly does, I think, create a lot of high expectations that we hope that the government can deliver on. I think that fundamentally, Nigeria is a very big, complex country, and it's easy to kind of reduce all of its insecurity to kind of a few catchphrases and stuff. And certainly, there are a lot of common root causes. If you look at the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, if you look at some of the cross-border threats and the fact that militant groups are increasingly, moving across Nigeria's borders. But I think that a lot of it fundamentally comes down to a lack of local governance in the country. And actually, if you look at, the insecurity over the past 25 years, a lot of it comes down to what I think one of my other colleagues was calling this term ungoverned spaces. And a lot of academics, I think kind of myself included, don't necessarily, we might take some issue with that phrase. There may be somewhat better phrases to use, but it does capture the fact that the Nigerian state hasn't been present in many communities, especially rural communities, and especially in many parts of the north. And so that's created the opportunity for these different militant groups, be they insurgents in the northeast or these different bandits and warlords in the northwest and north central, to essentially kind of gradually come in and fill in those gaps and essentially, take sovereignty from the Nigerian state and entrench themselves in those areas. And so I think that there's certainly, this is fundamentally at the moment, this is a security problem, it's a military problem, and a kinetic problem, right, that needs to be resolved to some extent through military operations and all these things that my panelists were discussing. But the broader kind of underlying drivers of violence are more political. They're around issues of governance, they're around issues of relations between communities, justice, land access, all these different issues. And fundamentally, a lot of it too is a question of policing. And one of the major problems that Nigeria has faced is that the military is kind of consistently overstretched because it's being asked to assume essentially policing roles, despite the fact that there's this proliferation of different law enforcement agencies. And so police reform absolutely needs to enter the equation, and that again is part of this kind of question as well of local governance. So there are many different factors.
All right, James, we'll definitely come back to those other factors, but let's go on our first break. When we return, we'll be going back a bit to look at the root cause of these issues, the multifaceted angles to this. Once we return, stay with us, we'll be right back. Many thanks for staying with us. It's still Politics HQ on News Central Television. And of course, we're looking at the security situation in the country and Nigeria's new ambassadorial nominees, of course, being put forward by Mr. President for confirmation by the Senate. We're still on insecurity. And just quickly, before we switch conversation to the ambassadorial nominees, I will come into you, Brigadier General Sani Usman. Let's consider the root cause of many of these security challenges that we have. Some will tell you that it's religious, some will say it's political, there are concerns that it's even economic. But for you, from a defense standpoint, somebody who has been with the Nigerian army, who is exposed to intel, who has been on the battlefield, what have you observed?
Basically, I think the last guest that commented has touched on some of these issues. To a large extent, the drivers, the triggers, and the root causes bordered on issue of governance. And the typical example is the fact that we have three tiers of government in this country: the federal, state, and the local government. So the local government system is not even working. And basically the problem that could have been dealt with, using local time-tested conflict resolutions mechanism, were left to, the state and the federal government. Even mundane issues are allowed to escalate. But of course, he has also made reference to the fact that the issue of social injustice, resource allocation and competition, and so on. And basically, there is a limit to which maybe you have to use coercive means or kinetic means to solve some of this problem. I always say, sometimes, in fact, some of the states, even if you bring 1 million soldiers or 1 million policemen, honestly, they cannot solve the problem unless the people have decided on their own. And the issue is that, to a large extent, the people have been left for too long. They have been fending for themselves, so they resort to self-help and all the rest of them. Take, for instance, an average person does not even know where he or she belongs. And basically, whenever you have security challenges in any given society, they are predicated on three things. You know, the social cohesion of that society, the political atmosphere, as well as the economic, circumstances of the people. So to a large extent, unless some of these issues are addressed, you still have some of these, these security challenges. Agreed. Poverty is not an excuse for crime, people will say, but to a large extent, people have consistently been law-abiding and all the rest. When they find it very difficult to fend for themselves, they might not necessarily be into criminality, but the criminal elements, they are always exploiting fault line within any given society. As a matter of fact, they are just filling a vacuum. And by the time we have had a kind of auditing of the security landscape in the northwest Nigeria, you'll be marveled at the level of, out of school children, the level of, poverty, and so many other things. So basically, to a large extent, it is not, but most importantly, he has touched one other thing. The issues of security challenges we have in this country, to a large extent, is simply because we neglected our policing system in this country. A case in point, how much have you invested in your policing system within the last 25 years, in terms of number, in terms of training, in terms of equipment, for an average policeman to meet up with the crime of the 21st century, fourth industrial revolution. These are the kind of things that should agitate our mind.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know you said
when you talk about it,
there are quite a couple of things, but because we're trying to also manage time, I'm going to put this question to you, and if you can respond in 30 seconds, it will be deeply appreciated. There are concerns that our security architecture has been infiltrated. Do you think this is the case?
Well, security architecture, when you talk about security architecture of this country, we have about, I think, between 29 to 30-something, components that make up the security architecture, right from the military, the police, the paramilitary, and so many other components of Nigerian society. But one thing I would rather say is the issue of this war economy that is real. This is an economic system that revolves around any security challenge you have where people are benefiting. And so you cannot rule out the possibility of some people, sometimes innocently or ignorantly or sometimes deliberately.
So definitely infiltration, the issue of infiltration, the possibility is really high.
Given the kind of circumstances you see, sometimes you begin to ask questions. And when you have, take for instance, Nigerians are at cross purposes. Some people are for, kind of dialogue or amnesty for the criminal elements. Others for kinetic. Under normal circumstances, we shouldn't have diverging, perspective when it comes to security issue. Issue of politicization should not be, a question when we're dealing with security issues. So to a large extent, you cannot rule out that kind of thing, but where specifically, that is what we have to find out and deal with it accordingly.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Aigbe, if you're there, my question, of course, at this time is, let's examine some of the approach the country as, not just the country itself, but we've seen approaches at different levels in order to secure peace and ensure that at the end of the day, this insecurity is managed. From some communities reaching peace deals with these bandits to the payment of ransom, to kinetic and non-kinetic approach as suggested even by our security operatives, to some individuals even saying, you know what, let's reintegrate, rehabilitate these people. They are young children, young people who are misguided. All they just need is some sort of guidance so that they can be useful to society. Looking at our approach in handling this matter over the years, how would you say it has fared?
Okay, thank you, Dapo. The approach has not been top-notch. Just like as we're just playing rhetoric or playing politics with security. And I want to respond to what Dr. Tony said about funding. I totally disagree against what he said, that is about funding. It does, like during the Buhari government, about 11.18 trillion was spent on 8 years of Buhari government. They just releasing funds and there's no accountability. Like you said, accountability should be the major work, not just release funds, but how to able to give account of how those funds are being spent. You heard about how there was a diversion. So, and back to your question, we talked about the kinetic approach, not using, we've been using military approach, and that's why we're spending so much money. And we can see the effect now that it's not being very effective, or because of the resilience of the communities. There was a National Plan 2017 about resilient building among the communities, able to mitigate this terror attack by involving stakeholder engagement, community leaders, youth leaders, women leaders to come together. Community approach. These are just using the military approach and there's a battle fatigue in our military now. As trained our law enforcement, battle fatigue in military psychology, you call it battle fatigue. As trained our law enforcement agency, and the bandits are taking advantage of this battle fatigue and become more audacious, and so we involve stakeholder engagement, involving them, and strategic communication. If you look at where the president said that during the Buhari government, said that technically defeated. I don't know what kind of language is that. Have you defeated Boko Haram? Yes or no? Not using rhetorics and the sincerity of the government, the ability to turn intention into action, are very dismal. So that's why, and the people, if sincerity of government too has lingered this fight against insurgency, and that's why the bandits are taking it over that the government does play politics and not sincere about it, and corruption in the system, mega corruption in the system, making that show that the government is not sincere about what they're saying and what they're trying to resolve it, and we're tending towards election 2027, and the approach is, but you can see now the approach of this president with this. Most 2 weeks adoption sequentially was just following in sequence in succession like that, and look at the bold step which President Ahmed Tinubu has taken now. We can see now Nigerians responding to that, creating hope in the mind of Nigerians. So if past leaders have done that, not just releasing funds and not be budgeting money for it, and not one would expect during the 8 years of Buhari as a former military head of state,
Dr. Aigbe,
you know that you have to know that not but how to give account of this money being spent.
Thank you so much.
I think stakeholders engagement is very critical, not just using military approach alone. Yeah, you strain our life. Many military men have been killed. You know what it is, because of training one soldier, and they just push them in the battlefield. So under the United Nations Resolution 235 and 236 talk about the use of technology. Like Dr. Tony said, technology will be wrong to assist in our life of the agency. In the 21st century now, there's a paper I presented at the University of Ibadan last week precisely on the national security, sustainable development, the role of information communication technology. So our law enforcement need to be trained. That most of them are not trained that use of technology.
I mean, there are quite a couple of issues here that are hanging and standing. But we would definitely come back to this. We need to go on a quick break. I'm still going to dwell on how we have fared in terms of approaching this issue from a military perspective, political perspective, even community level. Is this yielding fruit? Can we look back and say, to a very large extent, any of these approaches have worked?
A question when we're dealing with security issues. So to a large extent, you cannot rule out that kind of thing, but where specifically, that is what we have to find out and deal with it accordingly.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Aigbe, if you're there, my question, of course, at this time is, let's examine some of the approach the country as, not just the country itself, but we've seen approaches at different levels in order to secure peace and ensure that at the end of the day, this insecurity is managed. From some communities reaching peace deals with these bandits, to the payment of ransom, to kinetic and non-kinetic approach as suggested even by our security operatives, to some individuals even saying, you know what, let's reintegrate, rehabilitate these people. They are young children, young people who are misguided. All they just need is some sort of guidance so that they can be useful to society. Looking at our approach in handling this matter over the years, how would you say it has fared?
Okay, thank you, Dapo. The approach has not been top-notch. Just like as we're just playing rhetoric or playing politics with security. And I want to respond to what Dr. Tony said about funding. I totally disagree against what he said, that is about funding. It does, like during the Buhari government, about 11.18 trillion was spent on 8 years of Buhari government. They just releasing funds and no accountability. Like you said, accountability should be the major work, not just release funds, but how to able to give account of how those funds are being spent. You heard about how there was a diversion. So, and back to your question, we talked about the kinetic approach, not using, we've been using military approach, and that's why we're spending so much money. And we can see the effect now that it's not being very effective, or because of the resilience of the communities. There was a National Plan 2017 about resilient building among the communities, able to mitigate this terror attack by involving stakeholder engagement, community leaders, youth leaders, women leaders to come together, community approach. These are just using the military approach and there's a battle fatigue in our military now. As trained our law enforcement, battle fatigue in military psychology, you call it battle fatigue. As trained our law enforcement agency, and the bandits are taking advantage of this battle fatigue and become more audacious, And so we involve stakeholder engagement, involving them, and strategic communication. If you look at where the president said that during the Buhari government, said that technically defeated. I don't know what kind of language is that. Have you defeated Boko Haram? Yes or no? Not using rhetorics and the sincerity of the government, the ability to turn intention into action, are very dismal. So that's why, and the people, if sincerity of government too has lingered this fight against insurgency, and that's why the bandits are taking it over that the government does play politics and not sincere about it, and corruption in the system, mega corruption in the system, making that show that the government is not sincere about what they're saying and what they're trying to resolve it, and we're tending towards election 2027, and the approach is, but you can see now the approach of this president with this. Most 2 weeks adoption sequentially was just following in sequence in succession like that, and look at the bold step which President Ahmed Tinubu has taken now. We can see now Nigerians responding to that, creating hope in the mind of Nigerians. So if past leaders have done that, not just releasing funds and not be budgeting money for it, and not one would expect during the 8 years of Buhari as a former military head of state,
Dr. Aigbe,
you know that you have to know that not but how to give account of this money being spent.
Thank you so much.
I think stakeholders' engagement is very critical. Not just using military approach alone. Yeah, you strain our life. Many military men have been killed. You know what it is, because of training one soldier, and they just push them in the battlefield. So under the United Nations Resolution 235 and 236 talk about the use of technology. Like Dr. Tony said, technology will be wrong to assist in our life of the agency. In the 21st century now, there's a paper I presented at the University of Ibadan last week precisely on the national security, sustainable the role of information communication technology. So our law enforcement need to be trained. That most of them are not trained that use of technology.
I mean,
so
there are quite a couple of issues here that are hanging and standing. But we would definitely come back to this. We need to go on a quick break. I'm still going to dwell on how we have fared in terms of approaching this issue from a military perspective, political perspective, even community level. Is this yielding fruit? Can we look back and say, to a very large extent, any of these approaches have worked, or do we need a total overhaul? Stay with us, we'll be right back. Many thanks for staying with us. It's still Politics HQ on News Central Television. I still have my guest, James Barnett. I'm coming to you right now. James is a PhD candidate, University of Oxford. I'd like you to speak on the approaches in terms of resolving complex security situations like this. Nigeria, over the years, has adopted quite a few. But what would you say is missing in all of this?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. I think there are a few ways to look at this, but one of the key ones would be a degree of, I would say, inconsistency in the state's treatment of these groups that, be it kind of small scale criminal enterprises, or even these kind of, well, we could call even dissident movements, right? That are somehow agitating against the state, but maybe aren't necessarily fully engaged in violence yet. What we've seen over the past 25 years in Nigeria is that the Nigerian government is often quite inconsistent about which groups are met kind of fully with military force, often to an excessive degree, involving kind of, human rights violations, excessive indiscriminate violence, and then which groups are allowed to essentially come to the negotiating table and get, amnesties and, some sort of kind of pathway out of violence that's in some cases even kind of rewards them, right? So if we go back to the first major crisis that Nigeria experienced in the Fourth Republic, which security-wise, which was the conflict in the Niger Delta, that started with a very excessive militarization on the part of the Nigerian state, beginning in the Abacha era against people like Ken Saro-Wiwa, but then even in the first years of the Fourth Republic with the OD massacre and stuff like that. So the military came in with a very heavy hand. Likewise, if you look at the Southeast, how the Nigerian state has responded to agitations there, first under Massoud, then under, with IPOB. Even if you look at the Northeast, Operation Flush, which led to in Maiduguri in 2009, that led to the kind of the initial smashing of the Boko Haram movement, involved a tremendous amount of frankly, indiscriminate and often extrajudicial violence. But then at the same time, we see some of these militants, be they initially in the Niger Delta, increasingly in the Northwest, we see some of these warlords, when they themselves militarize and become quite deadly insurgents or deadly warlords, they then kind of start to lobby the state. And that kind of brings the state to the negotiating table, and they say, okay, these are our demands, and in order to disarm, this is what we expect. This is how both we individually, the warlords, want to be rewarded, or maybe this is the broader political program that we're advocating. And I think that this inconsistency has created a dilemma in Nigeria, because you have on the one hand the excessive militarization can very often kind of exacerbate popular grievances and drive more people into the arms of would-be insurgents and stuff. And that's where earlier Brigadier General made a very good comment about the issue of justice and local governance and that. But then at the other hand, when people have seen that if you become a militant, it's a way to get the government's attention. In some places, it's a way to even become very wealthy, like it's seen in the Niger Delta and stuff. So I think what Nigeria ultimately needs is they need to have kind of a better, both a localized understanding of what are the kind of local drivers of conflict and local strategies for addressing those conflicts, but also a kind of more consistent and better approach of, okay, this is how we deal with insecurity, but this is also how we listen to popular grievances, right? These are the crimes that are beyond the pale. This is the time when these are, when a movement becomes a dangerous movement that must be dealt with by force. But these are, below that threshold is, the movement where is the period where, we need to listen to popular grievances and stuff.
Thank you very much, James. Dr. Ofoyetan, I'm coming to you right now. Now, I would like you to speak on the issue of state police, which has been, at the front line when it comes to conversation as to quelling all of this. There's a strong advocate as regards the, of course, establishment of state police. How much of that do you see as panacea to what we are facing as a nation? And also, the issue of securing our national borders. We've seen countless times, through presentation, even by security chiefs, where they say many of these insurgents come in from outside the country. And once they're done, they, leave the country to neighboring countries, for refuge and all. How do you think we can properly secure our borders as a nation? Is it about building a wall around Nigeria?
Okay. Well, for me, the issue of a wall is a no-no. It's invisible. It will even defeat the essence of building it. It's over time. There are dynamites that can pull down your wall within a split of seconds. Even the bandits themselves can even make hole to come in and out, apart from the fact that it would also impede on your financial might as a nation, walling the whole of the Federal Republic of Nigeria or a whole region as it were. So even America that started the issue of let's build the wall, today it's an abandoned project. It's a project that has been abandoned. Now, but for the issue of state policing, I'm one of the strongest advocates for state policing. These are security metrics that can be considered, and they are veritable in contemporary security situations. The challenge is always how would you fund it, and secondly, whether the police will not be used to abuse the people and all those stuff like that. But I think today they are lazy arguments. Almost all the states in the country as we speak today have their own paramilitary organizations. They use it for traffic for now. The difference is that they are not being armed. Once it is declared as the president now had to take the bill to the National Assembly to legitimize what he has in mind. It would help the security agencies. Don't forget that one of the panelists, while he was talking, made allusion, I think it was the general or one of us here, that the military is already overstretched, which is a truism. This whole thing about insurgency, it's a domestic affair that ordinarily should be handled by the police. But the police today, do they have the numerical strength, the technological know-how, and the manpower to be able to face it all alone? The answer is in the negative. They can only be assisted, and that is why you see that the police and all other security agencies are actively involved, and unfortunately and painfully, the military is now taking the lead when the police ought to take the lead. But when we have state police, now the locals, they know their terrains, they know their streams, they know their rivers, they know their forests, they even know the gods that are worshipped in each of those forests, if we have to go metaphysical. So at the end of the day, they also know themselves. They know how to protect themselves within their own state. Once that power is given to them, absolutely, and that power can only be possible rather when you have a state policing system. It is not as if you have a law, now you have state policing system, it becomes permanent forever. It can take 10, 20 years later, we see that it's not working or it's not meeting, it's not good or fit for purpose. Then we begin to talk about amending the laws and all those stuff. But for now, I think it makes a lot of sense to talk about state police.
All right,
Every
thank
state
you.
will not be accountable. Governor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Because we are definitely racing with time. I'm coming back to you, Brigadier General Sani Usman. Before we, of course, wind up the conversation on security, I mean, as a military man, a soldier yourself, what would you, if you were to recommend or suggest specifics now, solutions that could help this fight? And I'm talking in the area of remuneration for soldiers, in the area of equipment and all. What would be your recommendation? Do you think that, for instance, soldiers are well paid, are well remunerated to go out there and, surrender their lives for the nation?
Maybe the last question, it seems as if you just asked it to mock the soldiers. Otherwise, it's a common knowledge that they are not well paid. When you compare the services, even though there is no amount of money you can get to compensate for the services or the sacrifices of an average soldier. But if you are talking about remuneration, I think there is need to critically look at it, given the kind of circumstances we found ourselves in the present times in this country. So I think in terms of remuneration, and had it been that we have had time, one of the key points that I think should have been the priority of the new Honorable Minister of Defense is the issue of enhancing the welfare of, personnel, in terms of training, in terms of remuneration, in terms of professionalism and all the rest of them. And above all, what do you do in case of the unforeseen happen, paying the sovereign price in terms of taking care of their families and all the rest. So basically, I think there is need to critically look at that aspect in terms of welfare of officers and soldiers, airmen and ratings as it is. And in fact, the whole of the security architecture vis-a-vis the kind of, services they render. But I realize again, it seems as if we tend to joke with a lot of things in this country, and that makes room for, corrupt practices. Because, do you know, not just the soldiers, even an average minister, his salary is not more than 1 million naira, for goodness sake. I think we should be realistic and have enough remuneration for people that are performing public service, especially those. The first line of duty is to lay down your life for the interest of the country, for others to live. So I think there is need to look at that aspect also.
All right, thank you very much. We'll go on a quick break. When we return, we'll switch conversations to talk about the ambassadorial nominees. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Many thanks for staying with us. It's still Politics HQ on News Central Television, and of course, I still have my guest with me. At this time, we will be doing some deep dive into the ambassadorial nominees, by Mr. President, which of course has been sent to the Senate for approval. I'll be coming to you, Dr. Aigbe. Now, for you, looking at the names, the crop of individuals on the list, or the various lists that Mr. President has forwarded, for confirmation by the House, are you confident in these persons? The question is for you, Dr. Aigbe.
Okay, the list just going to, from my findings of what I'm seeing here, the former Sole Administrator of Rivers State is there. I'm surprised. This one is really very highly favored because immediately he left, Buhari did that to him too. Then Itainang is among them. The First Lady of Imo State, Chioma Wakim, I'm surprised why she's there. Former Minister of Interior, ex-Army General, Abraham Dambazwa, he's there. So, but the rest, these are the people I'm questioning why they have to put this. Has been a
so would you say this list? Would you say this list? Okay. Would you say this list is more of competence-driven over political favoritism? Okay, apart from the list, one I just okay, maybe the Sole Administrator. I don't know why he's coming in again as an ambassador now, and First Lady of Imo State. We seem to be having a bit of difficulty trying to connect with you. We seem to be having a bit of difficulty trying to connect with you. Once we are able to get the connection clearly, I'll definitely come back. But I'd also like to direct the same question to you, Dr. Tony Ofoyetan. I mean, looking at the list being, of course, nominated by Mr. President for the House confirmation, this has been eliciting reactions. Are you comfortable to say, looking at Nigeria's global standing now, these individuals will do a thorough job in retooling the country's image better?
I think with the exception of those that have corruption charges against them.
Who are those?
Those are the ones that...
Who are the ones with corruption charges?
I said, I think with the exception of those that have corruption charges against them, with the exception of those, for me, it's as good as those the president feels that he wants to work with. These are members of the political class. But I actually expected people that are younger, people that are, I don't want to, let me use the word smarter too. I'm not saying these guys are not smart enough, but I expect in contemporary Nigeria, where you have a lot of young, intelligent people that are also well exposed. That was what I was expecting Mr. President to do. Put young and fresh, intelligent guys there, but he feels more comfortable with the people he has nominated. So as far as I'm concerned, I would only crave his indulgence that just like you have situation where at the last minute a name like El Rufai was refused at the National Assembly on security ground, maybe the National Assembly can be magnanimous to reject those people. The issue is not whether the case has been concluded or not, whether they are guilty or they are not guilty. Once you have been, cited for corruption charges and you have cases in court, irrespective of whether the case has been concluded, has not been concluded, is still ongoing, you have not been indicted or you have not been convicted. Once such cases are in court, I think it makes a lot of sense for the sake of the credibility of a nation called Nigeria that such names should not be allowed to go. I think that's just my own.
All right. How about you, Brigadier General Sani Usman? Your take, sir?
Well, I think even though I do not know all the 60-something, but the people that I've known, and somebody was even talking about intelligence and smarter, and let's even look at the former Minister of Interior. I got his PhD as the rank of captain, so you can imagine him and being a professor and so on, and giving the wealth of experience. And just like you rightly observed, it is the prerogative of Mr. President, depending on the country and issue at hand. Remember that this country has lost valuable diplomatic time, so to speak, if I may put it that way. For 2 years, we don't have, ambassadors. And to a large extent, if you look at even the former chief of naval staff, who had also been an ambassador and administrator of River States, those things really count. And I'm so sure they will give them the country that is most appropriate to do the nice job. And I can give you one other example where such things are very, very important. Take, for instance, Niger Republic. Our pastors coincidentally being a military officer when there was a coup in Niger, and the kind of the impasse between Nigeria, ECOWAS, and all the rest. Coincidentally being a military person, having served in the staff college as a directing staff, that to a large extent mitigated the kind of tension between Nigeria. I was there and I saw it. So sometimes we have to critically evaluate certain things to comment on them. And I'm so sure before they come to the decision to nominate these people for ambassadorial position, they must have done their thorough work and decide which country best fit them and the interest they are going to project. We have just had we are still having a problem with our large extent. This problem was exacerbated by Nigerians themselves because of dissatisfaction with the government. You can imagine if we have had ambassadors in these countries, to a large extent they've been able to mitigate some of the. It is a very good choice, and we look forward to seeing more of such persons. Some of them, even they had been defense attaché over time in some countries. So
all right, thank you so much.
For the betterment of this country and the relationship.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen. Former, of course, Director of Media and Public Relations, Nigerian Army, and also a security expert, Brigadier General Sani Usman, thank you for your time. James Barnett, a PhD candidate, University of Oxford, and Dr. Tony Ofoyetan is the Director General, National Institute of Professional Security, and Dr. Diyeli Aigbe, a lecturer, Department of Criminology and Security Studies, Caleb University. Once again, thank you for your time, gentlemen. At this point, great. At this point, this, of course, is where we close shop for the day. In case you missed out, you can actually catch up on our YouTube platform. That's at News Central TV. You can also choose to follow us on social media. The handle is there on your screen. You can choose to follow me personally at Dapo Adegboye. Until I come your way again tomorrow, good night. Up next is Tonight.